Allah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We start by praising Allah as all praise is due to Him. And we ask Allah to send His peace and blessings upon His last and His final messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is session 2, brothers and sisters. We're continuing on in this book, The New Muslim Guide, for those of you that haven't been with us before. We're on chapter 8, which is entitled Your Food and Drink. We just started one session on this chapter last time, which was last weekend, and we'll continue on from there. So we spoke about how Islam, being a complete way of life, gives us guidance in all aspects of life, including things like food and drink. So this means human beings need guidance in everything. And Islam is not just there to tell you how to pray to God and dictate aspects of your religion in terms of worship and things that happen inside the mosque only. Rather, it affects all areas of life. So we already went through a chapter talking about money and financial transactions. Some people may feel religion has no place to talk about money. No, it does, right? Because it's to ensure a cohesive society, to prevent injustice and so on, right? So all the rules and regulations and guidelines that are there are pretty general and high level. They are not as detailed and prescriptive as they are in the acts of worship, like the 5 pillars of Islam that we already went through, right? But they are there for our benefit, to ensure the smooth running of the society and to ensure that people's rights are protected. So now we spoke about food and drink, and we said that the general rule for all food and drink is that it's either what? It's halal or haram. Most food is going to be considered automatically halal, right? You discover a new fruit or vegetable in the jungle that your ancestors didn't eat or know about. It's not mentioned in the Quran or Sunnah. Automatically you can assume it's what? Halal. The only thing that's going to make it haram is if it's explicitly mentioned as being haram in the Quran or Sunnah, and that's a short list of things which are mentioned, or it's something which is overtly harmful. For example, a poisonous vegetable that if you eat it, you may die from it, or it intoxicates you when you consume it. Then such a thing would be forbidden for that secondary reason, okay? Last time we talked about intoxicants, and we said every intoxicant, doesn't matter what it's made out of, whether it's wine, whether it's beer, whiskey, each of them maybe is made from a different fruit or a different vegetable through a similar process of fermentation and all that. It doesn't matter as long as it's intoxicating the mind, and it's called in Arabic khamr. Khamr literally comes from the thing which covers your head. Khimar, like the scarf that a woman wears, is called khimar. Why? Because it covers the head. So what they mean here is alcohol and intoxicants cover the brain, so you cannot make good decisions anymore. And we said the Sharia is here to protect the 5 necessities of life. What are they? What are the 5 necessities that Islam is here to protect? Top of the list, number 1 is deen, religion, right? You can find them here on page 187 if you have the book. Are you going to share the book, brother, or not possible? Not possible, okay. So anyone has a copy of the book in the class? No, nobody does, huh? You can download the PDF if you want to follow along on your device. There's also a website. There's an app, I think, that you can download as well. But anyways, we'll cover it verbally. So here they talk about the 5 necessities. Religion, number 1. So that means you can lose your life in defense of your religion, because religion is so important, right? And that is something like jihad fi sabilillah, right? When you go and fight for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to defend Islam and to defend the Muslims and so on. Number 2 is life. So human life is precious. That's why we have very severe punishment for murder, for example, because a human life is valuable and must be protected and must be preserved. People cannot feel that they can take another person's life with impunity and that nothing is going to happen to them. Number 3 is the mind. And that's where we just said, no intoxicants to protect the mind. Because if you lose your mind, then you don't know what decisions you are making. You're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt others, and the society becomes quite chaotic as a result. We can see what drugs and alcohol are doing everywhere. Even a khutbah I attended at UIA just a couple weeks ago was talking about the drug problem in Malaysia. and how big it's getting and how many people it's affecting, and the numbers are scary. And a large portion of the people who are getting affected by that are Muslims, Malay Muslims. They are not necessarily the non-Muslims, right? So this is something which is very sad and must be addressed and combated at all levels and in all aspects. Number 4, they talk about property, the protection of wealth. My house, my money, my belongings have a right to be safe. I talked about how all my cars got stolen before in the United States. This is not the way. I should be able to park my car and not even lock the door and not worry that anyone will steal it. But there we were locking it. We were putting even bars on the steering wheel, and still they're breaking in and stealing the stereo and stealing this one and that one. So the life is not meant to be that way. So there are severe punishments in Islam for a thief and for those who are taking people's property unjustly. And we talked about that in the previous chapter when we talked about coercion and bribery and stealing people's goods by lying and manipulating and all that, right? And how that will make your earnings unlawful. And number 5 is progeny. And this is the importance of lineage, the importance of people's honor and chastity and dignity being protected. So this is where there are laws and punishment against zina, fornication, adultery, rape, all these kind of things, right? Wallahu al-musta'an. So here they give us details about the Islamic ruling on alcoholic drinks, and some of that can be applied to other forms of intoxicants as well. So here they say consuming alcoholic drinks such as wine is one of the major sins, and its prohibition is confirmed by textual evidence from the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's traditions. So when it's a major sin, that means what? It's on a smaller list of sins, because there are many different ways you can sin, but many of those are minor sins. Minor sins means the punishment for it in this life and in the hereafter will be much less. But a major sin means it's already at the top of the list as being worse than other sins. And major sins many times include things that violate those 5 that we talked about, right? So major sins would be things like associating partners with God, committing murder, stealing, fornication and adultery. Drinking alcohol is on that list, right? So because it's a major sin, then the Muslim should be more cautious and keen to avoid it, because you don't want to be on that list that come on the Day of Judgment having committed major sins. May Allah save us. The Quran says, O you who believe, intoxicants, gambling, stone altars, and divining arrows are abominations devised by shaitan, by Satan. Avoid them so that you may be successful. And we talked about this verse when we talked about gambling in the previous chapter. We understand that these things, shaitan uses them to sow animosity and hatred amongst people. And you can see that in actuality, the statistics were quite scary when I checked this before, like in the United States. The vast majority of dangerous, violent crimes are committed by people while they're under the influence of some form of drugs or alcohol. Because when you're in your right mind, it's going to be much rarer that you're going to go murder someone, or you're going to go rape, or you're going to go rob, or these kind of things, right? But usually when someone's high, when someone's on drugs or under the influence of alcohol, that's when they don't have good decision-making capabilities. Their inhibitions are down because the brain has been affected, right? So the shaitan loves that, and he loves that you'll be making bad decisions and you'll be hurting others and hurting yourself. So here Allah describes all types of intoxicants as a type of filth and abomination, and commands the believers to avoid them in order to secure success in this life and in the hereafter. Now, was alcohol forbidden at the beginning of Islam? It was not. So alcohol and the forbidding of alcohol and intoxicants is one of those commandments in Islam that came down gradually. It came down in stages. So there were a few different verses that were revealed over the years highlighting to believers the fact that alcohol is not very good. But they were kind of given the choice to avoid or not, meaning there would not be a sin if they continued to drink, right? And so you have some companions like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. he was like the Prophet ﷺ in that he never drank alcohol ever in his life, prior to Islam nor after Islam, right? But there were others that no, drinking was a big part of their life, and they may even have been what we would call today alcoholics, because they drank so much or they drank so frequently and so on, right? So later on in Islam, the ruling came down that you cannot pray while you're drunk, because one of the companions came and he prayed after they had had a long drinking session, and he wanted to read Quran and lead the prayer. But when you're drunk, can you function properly? No, right? You're going to slur your speech. Your thinking's not right. So he mixed up the verse and said something blasphemous and insulting unintentionally. He didn't even realize what he's saying, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to them that now you cannot come to prayer drunk. So that meant if you're really going to drink hard, you're going to drink when? At night after Isha prayer, and then sleep it off, and by Fajr hopefully you're functional again, right? Because you need some hours for your body to process that poison and get it out through the liver. So and then finally it came to them that no, this thing is something which is bad, fajtanibuh, so you have to avoid it completely, right? So now it becomes completely forbidden. When that verse was revealed, what happened? The reaction was unbelievable. If you want to contrast it against when it happened in America, you know, in America during the Prohibition, they tried to make alcohol illegal for a couple of years. Did it work? It failed miserably, right? It failed miserably. Why? Because the people didn't want to stop, right? But the American society was built by Puritans, they called them, which were very religious Protestants who were fleeing England because of their religion. They were not free to practice their religion, and they believed that alcohol and gambling and other things were bad. So you found that these things had become more prevalent in society, so they tried to make it illegal. Until today, it's illegal to do gambling in most places in America. The casinos only can exist in Las Vegas, one city, or on the Indian reservations, which have their own law. They don't have to follow American law fully. So with alcohol, they said, let's forbid that, because you can see how a drunk person beats his wife and his kids, drives the car and crashes it, hurts people, this one, that one. So they said, let's make it illegal. They tried. That was the time when Al Capone and the mafia and all this thing grew. They started producing alcohol illegally, selling it secretly underground, what did they call them? Speakeasies, which were like hidden bars that people could go to secretly and all this. And it became big business. And the people, you know, the thing which became forbidden became more attractive to them. Where for Islam, it was quite different, because the people were changed from the inside out. And in America, what happened when they made alcohol illegal? You had Elliot Ness and all these police and special forces were created to fight against the mafia, and they killed many people and they arrested many people, and all kinds of unhealthy alcohol was made through bootlegging, and people died from that. It was unsanitary and unhealthy because it wasn't being done in professional distilleries anymore and all that, right? So there was a lot of negative impact on the society because people weren't ready and they didn't want it. But Islam did it gradually and said, oh, you who are alcoholics and drinking a lot, we're going to slowly push you towards, you need to stop. And then get to the point where khalas. So when that final verse came down telling them that alcohol is haram, the Sahaba narrate the scene. They said, one of them says, I was pouring some wine for some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and when the verse came, immediately people took what was in the jugs and what was in the cups and they started spilling it into the street. Till he said the gutters of the streets of Medina were running, they were flowing with red wine, right? Just all this alcohol was pouring down the streets. And some people already had it in their mouth, and the caller who came because he heard the verse, he started going through the streets and saying, you know, the Messenger of Allah has received this verse, and he's reading the verse that khalas, alcohol is now forbidden. So they said, we had it in our mouth, we spit it out. And some of them even went to the point that they had already drank it just maybe minutes earlier, they threw it up. They gagged themselves and got it out because they said, now it's haram, I don't want it in my body. Can you imagine? Even they then started taking the jugs that had the alcohol and they started smashing them. They were told later you could have washed them and used them. You didn't have to destroy them. They said, no, we didn't want anything tied to haram. Like that's the old life gone, finished. That's how fast their reaction was. Can you imagine, right? So imagine today if we come and we just announce to the people how many of the youth are using drugs or drinking alcohol, and we came and told them this is haram. Will they all immediately stop? They will not. Because that internal transformation that comes with faith hadn't occurred yet. You know what I mean? Assalamu alaikum. Nice to see you, mashallah. So, this kind of event, I think it's unparalleled or unmatched. Other societies have tried to impose things, but you cannot have a successful system with a one-way imposition. You need what is referred to in Arabic as ilzam and iltizam. So you need authority, meaning the government needs to have the authority to say alcohol is forbidden, it's illegal to manufacture it, drugs are not to be sold in our country, for example, right? You need that position and authority, but then you need people who are willing to follow. Otherwise, you get that system that we talked about where people were doing bootlegging and creating it illegally, and drugs are trafficked illegally and whatever, right? That's why in America now they've kind of given up. They said, marijuana is everywhere. When I was growing up, I don't know a single person who didn't smoke marijuana other than me. From all the people I knew, Muslim and non-Muslim, youth, I don't know a single person that did not smoke drugs except for maybe 2 or 3 people that I can count on my hand. Everybody else. I mean, I was 12, 13 years old, standing at the bus, waiting for the bus to come to take us to the middle school, and the kids were getting high there at the bus stop. The one who carved an apple into a pipe to smoke like a bong, to smoke weed, the one who was using the Pepsi can or anything. And they would be, it's fully inhaled. He's letting it, settle into his lungs and system. And then as he's stepping onto the bus, he's blowing it out and getting onto the bus semi-high already to go to school in the early morning. And then they're openly talking about how they were using it with their parents. And this was, in the 80s and 90s when I'm growing up. So it only has been getting worse. So that's why America finally reached the point where they said, what are we making marijuana illegal for? We better legalize it and tax it and make lots of money out of it. So suddenly the illegal drug dealer criminal now became a successful businessman who's legitimately selling and so on, right? So it's quite sad, but there's no way for you to combat drugs and alcohol without people having the desire and willingness to want to quit. My mom works, as I mentioned to you all before, in drug and alcoholism counseling. So in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, they have their 12-step program to help people quit. So the first thing they will say is, you cannot force anyone to quit. This person has to be willing and has to have a strong desire. And then they have to go through these steps, which usually is very difficult for most addicts. The first one is getting over the denial. Because most addicts are what? They're in denial. They say, I'm not addicted. I can stop at any time. It's like, sure, show me. Go a week or 2 without drinking. Oh, no way. The one who drinks daily, if they just don't drink, it gets so bad that they have to drink from the early morning. Otherwise, they get what? They get tremors. Their whole body is going through what's called withdrawal. And the body physically cannot take it because of how much it's dependent on that substance, that if you didn't take it just for hours, the body starts to shake, they sweat, they get maybe diarrhea. Some people have to be hospitalized. Some people can die from the withdrawal. That's why it has to be sometimes medically monitored, and they may even use some other substances, some other drugs to help you come down from that, like heroin or cocaine and things like that. It's not easy to quit some of them. Very difficult. So the best thing is not to start in the first place, obviously. Anyways, we talked about that for too long, but just to give you an idea of the process that the forbidding of alcohol went through in the history of Islam, today, can we do the same thing with the average Muslim? Tell them alcohol is okay for you in the beginning, then you stop it by just not praying drunk, and then eventually you quit it? No. Now we have to say from day one, alcohol is forbidden. But is it going to be easy for someone to quit drinking overnight? Not necessarily. Can a person become Muslim even if they drink alcohol? Does drinking alcohol take you out of Islam? No. No, right? Here's a story, for example. In Islam, if you are drunk in public, it's punishable. But if you are drunk in private, it's between you and God. So Islam doesn't dig into houses and come and check if you have any liquor available or not. And no, that's not the job. Once Umar ibn al-Khattab was walking and he heard a party on the other side of the wall. He could tell that there's something going on from the noise. Probably they're getting drunk. Probably there's men and women in an inappropriate way and all that. So he wanted to jump over the wall. So one of the companions stopped him and said, nope, we can't do that. In Islam, we don't spy on people. Whatever they're doing in the privacy of their own home is up to them. But once it becomes out in public, different story. So in Islam, if you're drunk in public, then you will be lashed in public. You'll be punished, right? And that's a form of humiliation for the person to try to deter them from doing that again. And it's also a message to everybody else, don't do this. Otherwise, this is going to happen. Because once you're drunk in public, you're now a menace and a danger to others. I told you the story about my friend, my own personal friend, and his whole family killed by a drunk driver. Right? What was their crime? Just out in the evening walking on the street, and this youngster who's high, he went up on the sidewalk with his car and killed all of them. Husband, wife, and child. Right? What was their crime? They did no crime. They didn't deserve to die. He also didn't mean to kill them, but he was completely out of his mind and he could not control the car. So being drunk in public is a danger to the society, and therefore you will get punished for that, to deter and to prevent that from happening in the first place. Now, it happened to one man because he was an alcoholic. He was brought to the Prophet ﷺ to be judged and punished in this way more than once. So when he was brought on multiple occasions, one of the companions cursed him because he saw this as like despicable, that you are doing this major sin and you keep doing it over and over again. So may the curse of Allah be upon you. Curse of Allah be upon you is a very severe word. It means that you are far from the mercy of Allah. May you be removed from God's mercy. Right? It's something you say against the enemies of Allah. You don't say it against the believer. So the Prophet ﷺ got angry at him, the one who cursed him. And he said, don't do that, because by Allah, like I'm testifying that he loves Allah and his messenger. So he is a good believer and he does love Allah and his messenger, but this is his weakness and his problem, right? So it doesn't mean that you're a non-Muslim because you drink alcohol, but it is a major sin and something that a Muslim must give up. What a Muslim must believe is that alcohol is bad. If a Muslim says, I believe alcohol is fine, as there are some so-called Muslims that try to claim that today, then you can't be a Muslim anymore. Because the verses of the Quran and the sayings of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ are too clear on this matter, that it's considered that which must be known by every Muslim. Meaning, no Muslim can be ignorant of the fact that alcohol is forbidden. What does that mean? There are some details of Islam that not every Muslim knows, right? Unless you've gone deep and studied like a scholar. So that's okay. You don't have to know everything. But these basic things, even the non-Muslim knows, right? I saw some lyrics that some rapper said recently, and in the lyrics he's rapping about how the Muslim doesn't drink wine or something like this, right? So even the non-Muslims, they know that we're not allowed to drink alcohol. So no Muslim can come today and say alcohol is fine to drink. No, you're not a Muslim if you believe that. Okay, so here the second point. The Prophet ﷺ said, every intoxicant is wine, is khamr, and every wine is unlawful. Whoever drinks wine in this world and dies addicted to it without repentance will not drink it in the hereafter. And one of the beautiful parts of paradise will be drinking alcohol. It sounds weird, huh? We just said alcohol is illegal in this life. How come it's legal in the next? I mean, what is it that the rich and famous in this life love to do? They love drinking alcohol. And it's all about what? The fanciest brand and the age of the alcohol. It affects the price and the taste of it and all that. And they go in all this like deep things about wine tasting and I don't know which kind of whiskey or this one or that one is the best. And right, it's a whole world. And there are many layers and levels and brands. And if you're very rich and famous, then you're drinking the most expensive and most delicious and all this kind of stuff. So in paradise, Allah tells us about the best type of drinks that He will make. for us. And they are cocktails. There's going to be even something that's mixed with it, which is going to make it smell good, taste good. The end of it is going to be just as good as the beginning of it was. It's not going to be like that last, little bit in a glass of any drink that you're having that you don't like and you don't want to finish. So that whole description is given. The Prophet ﷺ said, the one who is an alcoholic and dies that way and never repents and stops that before they die, then they'll be deprived of alcohol in paradise. The alcohol in paradise, of course, is different than this alcohol in that it doesn't do what? It doesn't get you drunk, right? You're going to say, well, that's one of the main reasons people drink in this world. They want to get drunk. They want to escape from all the misery of this life, right? Well, in paradise, you don't have that misery anymore. You're not depressed in paradise. You're not sad about your girlfriend who dumped you or whatever other things that people drink to try to escape from, right? So in paradise, you're already happy. So drinking in alcohol in paradise is not to get drunk, nor will you get any of the side effects of alcohol. What happens after you get drunk? You get a hangover. So you get a headache and you vomit and all this awful things happen to your body. None of that would happen in paradise either, of course, right? Explaining once that drinking wine decreases faith and contradicts it altogether, the Prophet ﷺ declared, when somebody takes an alcoholic drink, then he is not a believer at the time of drinking it. So that shows you how severe this sin is in the eyes of Allah, that it and similar major sins like fornication and other things like that. When you go and you indulge in your desires to this level, it's as if faith has left your body temporarily. Temporarily, you're outside of faith, and then it comes back to you, right? So that for a Muslim, when they hear that, they're not okay with that, because faith is the most precious thing, as we just mentioned, right? You can lose your life in defense of faith. So faith is that which you want to preserve by any means, and alcohol is something which can destroy faith and takes many people out of the fold of Islam eventually if they continue down that path. May Allah protect us. As we mentioned, Allah has imposed corporal punishment on drinkers so that they lose their dignity and credibility in society. So in Islam, if someone's punished publicly for alcohol and they're known as a drunkard, then we're not going to take their testimony in a court. They're not going to be someone who's reliable as a witness to contracts, for example. So they've already been blacklisted almost. You've fallen from the grace of the reputable people in society, right? And for the good practicing Muslim, it would be problematic for them when a man comes and asks, for example, for his daughter's hand in marriage, and he's an alcoholic or he's known as someone who drinks in public and things like that. People wouldn't be okay with that if they are practicing Muslims. Although in today's world, it's funny to hear when people will say, we're okay with the fact that he doesn't pray and he drinks alcohol, but he makes a lot of money, he has a really good job, so we'll accept him. It's like, what kind of criteria is this, right? So many Muslim families are shifting towards that materialistic and worldly kind of criteria to judge, and that's wrong. Doesn't matter if he's the richest man in the world and has a great job, but if he's not, reliable in this space, how many a drunkard, for example, beats their wife and abuses their children and does all other kinds of things as a result of the influence of alcohol. He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, warns those who persist in drinking wine and intoxicants for that matter, and all intoxicants for that matter, and die without ever repenting with a severe punishment in the hereafter. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Allah the Exalted and Glorious made a covenant to those who drink intoxicants to make them drink tinat al-khabal. Tinat al-khabal refers to the pus and other unpleasant fluids that ooze out of the bodies of those doomed to hellfire. So what will happen in hellfire, a person is constantly being bombarded and tortured. And as a result, your flesh is burning, you have wounds, you have all this disgustingness that's going to be coming out of the body from pus and fluids. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to force those who die committing this sin and never repent from it, He will force them to drink from that awful disgustingness, right? So that also for the believer who believes in the unseen and believes in the afterlife should be a big deterrent. Okay, I don't want that ever to happen to me. Therefore, I'm going to run in the opposite direction. Because many times what happens with drinking is that you start drinking as a result of peer pressure. I remember in high school having a friend who was non-Muslim, and we both didn't drink. And then there was some parties coming, like, you know, the prom and big things like that they'll do in high school. And in high school, it's illegal to drink in America. You're not supposed to drink till you're 21. It's not like maybe Canada, Mexico, you can be 18. So, but most of the youth will drink, and they start drinking from young ages. Like I told you, I mean, I knew kids using marijuana and drinking from age 12, 13. It was normal. By the time you're 15, 16, almost everybody's doing that. So to be in high school in that age and not having done that yet is like rare. So this boy, he hadn't drank. But then once he went to one or two of those parties, which I didn't participate in, I found him and he said, no, I started drinking now, that's it. Meaning that covenant of I'm never going to drink is already over. Why? Because of the peer pressure. You're around people who are drinking, they're drunk, they're laughing, and you feel you're the only one left out. It's quite difficult. So you succumb to that kind of peer pressure, especially when you're young. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ said even a believer is not allowed to sit at a table with people while they're drinking alcohol. They're drinking, you need to be somewhere else. Once they're done drinking alcohol, you could sit with them and talk or eat or do something else. But while they're drinking, you're not supposed to be with them, right? Because otherwise, there is that kind of pressure. And I remember people trying to pressure me. They were bothered by the fact that I didn't drink. It's like, what is your problem? Yeah, you have your way, I have my way. But it's like, no. They are like da'is for shaitan, right? They're saying you don't know what you're missing out on, and you just got to try it. And you don't have to get drunk, but at least, you know, just you're missing out on this experience. And they're like trying to, as if they're salesmen for, you know, alcohol or something. SubhanAllah. Here, we're told about another aspect, and that is anyone involved with the industry of alcohol is sinful and cursed by Allah. So here it says, in fact, this severe warning also extends to those who get involved in any way in any action related to the production and drinking of alcohol. The Prophet ﷺ cursed 10 types of people in connection with alcoholic drinks: those who produce them, those for whom they are produced, those who drink them, those who serve them, those who carry them, those for whom they are carried, those who serve them, those who sell them, those who benefit from the price paid for them, those who buy them, and those for whom they are bought. So every aspect of it is forbidden. And why is that important? Because you have people who try to justify selling it or making it or doing different things like that, but they'll say things like, I don't drink it. So I still remember going to a mosque in the deserts of El Centro between California and Arizona, and there's this little musalla, little surah, little prayer room there, and it's locked because people don't come there so often. So we said, where's the key? And someone told us the key is with the shop next door. Shop next door is a liquor store. I said the key to the mosque is with the liquor store. So we go in and we find an Arab, supposed to be from a Muslim background. He's selling the liquor. So he has the key to the mosque. We get in, we go in the mosque, and then we say, Ya akhi, what are you doing? How are you selling alcohol? He said, no, don't worry. I don't sell it to Muslims. You don't sell it to Muslims, you think that makes it okay. So you can poison others, but don't poison your own people? It doesn't work like that. You believe something's bad, then don't make money out of it. We already talked about that in the previous chapter, right? We cannot financially gain from the thing that we believe is forbidden. Just because we said we are not partaking in it doesn't make it okay. Right? So this kind of a mentality is problematic. We had another guy in Southern California who built a masjid and was the financial sponsor of that masjid. And then he told the khatib who wants to come and give Jum'ah prayer there, you can give khutbah about everything except alcohol. Why can't we talk about the evils of alcohol in your sermons in your mosque? Because that's how he makes his money. Oops. So he thinks he would go to Hajj every year, they said, and he spends lots of money on, you know, good causes like building this mosque and all that. He thinks somehow his money is going to become Islamic money laundering, right? My money is dirty spiritually and sinfully, and now it'll become lawful by me spending it on all these good things. It doesn't work like that. The money is dirty, it's dirty, that's it. It's not going to be accepted from you that you built a mosque, nor that you went to pilgrimage, none of that, because it was financed from haram, right? So selling alcohol is completely forbidden. Imagine if no one's willing to make it, if no one's willing to sell it, if no one's willing to serve it. It's very sad for me when I see a Muslim who's working in a shop that sells alcohol or a restaurant that sells alcohol and then they're serving it and so on. It's not allowed. It's completely forbidden. Haram, right? So we need to be very cautious and make sure we're not affiliated with alcohol in any way. Okay, here they talk about drugs. Do you think that methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin have been mentioned by name in the Quran or the sayings of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? No, right? And now you have crystal meth and Molly and this one and that one, and there's thousands of LSD, and there's so many different types of drugs, and many of them are manufactured in a laboratory and so on, and not necessarily very natural the way maybe marijuana or tobacco or some of these other things are. So how do we determine that these are forbidden? It's because we already mentioned the Prophet ﷺ said every intoxicant is a wine, is a form of an alcohol, basically, right? Is similar to alcohol. So therefore, anything that intoxicates and you lose your mind, you are unable to know exactly what you're saying and doing, and you're not in control, then it becomes forbidden as well. So they say here, taking drugs, whether such drugs are plant-based or manufactured, and whether they are inhaled, swallowed, or injected, is considered to be one of the major sins in Islam. For while they serve as intoxicants, they destroy the nervous, psychological, and neurological disorders, and even lead to their death. And the reality is, intoxicants, we call them in Arabic, Ummul Khaba'ith, the mother of filthy and evil things. Why? Because we mentioned earlier, most people, when they do anything bad, you find that they're under the influence of something. The vast majority of violent crimes are committed by people while they're high on drugs or alcohol, right? So it's not when they're in their right mind and they're thinking very rationally. So this is where Islam says avoid these things, because otherwise this is what's going to get you to fall into sin or to commit crimes and so on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran also, do not kill yourselves, Allah is most merciful to you. And it's very possible, as we know, to overdose on drugs even from using it only one time. Some people, their body, and that's the problem, you may not know until you try these things, their body cannot take it, because everybody's body will react differently to certain drugs. So there are many young people, some of them I know them personally, they are relatives or they are in-laws from my mother's husband's side and so on. They overdose on drugs, and it might be from the first usage. The first usage, you use heroin or cocaine for the first time and you die, your heart stops and you're gone, right? And it was all for what? For 15 seconds of pleasure. Maybe they will feel that rush or that high just for minutes or seconds, or even an hour or two. It's not something that's going to last for very long. And the crash afterwards is very awful, and then they become addicted. So anything that destroys your body and kills you, whether immediately or slowly, is haram in Islam. Why? Because Allah says, do not kill yourselves, right? Suicide is forbidden in Islam. Any questions about drugs or alcohol? We talked about it in a lot of detail, but hopefully it's clear why it's forbidden and what the detriment of it is.
Just a quick one.
Sure.
Where do you draw the line between classifying something as an intoxicant versus like in medicine, if it's prescribed to you or if you're sick in the hospital,
Yeah.
morphine, right? Like there is a distinction between these.
As far as I know, if there is something that's medically related, and it's something which is going to be utilized, like anesthesias that are going to put you out completely, for example, or certain types of pain management after the fact. But I think what you need to be careful with as a Muslim or even as a non-Muslim is the over-prescription of certain types of drugs. So recently they found this family in the United States, which is the main family behind the company that produces, Oxycontin and all these kind of opioids. They are more like drug dealers than a pharmaceutical company. So what happened is they overproduce and they overprescribe. and they incentivize doctors to give. So I remember anytime I've had a surgery, and I had a number of surgeries when I was young, I was like a teenager, and they would just write you Vicodin or Oxycontin or all these kind of things in large quantities. A full bottle of 30 or 60 pills, and it's like, I may have pain for just a couple days. Do I really need this? So I remember my mom would tell me when I come out of the general anesthesia, I would be in a very bad mood, and I would say all kinds of things, and I don't remember it because it's like wiped from my memory somehow, subhanAllah. But she would say, yeah, you were shouting at the nurse, and you were telling me, give me a pill now. I'm in so much pain, and this, that. So I would take that pill for the first maybe, session. But after that, once I'm more conscious, the pain is bearable or manageable, and you could fight it off with Tylenol, maybe with codeine or something, a little bit stronger, but much less addictive than Vicodin and all these kind of things. So I think a person needs to be very careful about taking those pills because some of the manufacturers seem to be designing it to be addictive and then pushing doctors and incentivizing them to overprescribe it. So you had like a little clinic in a small hick town in the South that was getting millions of pills a month. And it's like, you can't have that many patients. What are you doing with all these pills? And they became like a distribution center, like drug dealers. And people would take the prescription and sell it in the streets. And I worked in a dental clinic where we would get these patients, subhanAllah, so sad. It was clear that they were drug addicts. And so they would come to us with like a rotten tooth. And so we would tell them, let's treat the tooth, take some antibiotics, and then we'll pull it. And they would say, okay, give me the medicine, but I need something for the pain. It's like, okay, sure, here's something for the pain. Then they're back a couple days later, I've already finished that, I need something else for the pain, or it's not working, I need something stronger. It's like, are you taking the antibiotics? I don't see the infection getting better. So we need to pull this out, or we need to do a root canal. They don't want it to be treated. They want it to stay there and to be an excuse to go around clinic to clinic and collect pills and use them because they're addicted and so on, right? So it's a very sad situation where even if you're using it for medical purposes, you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful. And in general, narcotics and hallucinogenics and all these things should be avoided completely unless there's some absolute necessity for that some scholars may make permissible due to the necessity that you use certain pain medications and so on, which have certain effects on your brain. The problem is that how addictive some of them are and how much they've destroyed young people's lives. I think one of the leading causes of death now in the United States became overdosing on opioids and things like this. And many times the people using them are not the poor that used to be the drug addicts in the 80s and 90s, where you had like the African American community, others were crack addicts and all that. This is now white, upper middle class kids who are popping all these pills and getting them through doctors and through somewhat legal channels, unfortunately, right? May Allah protect us. Any other questions or comments?
So I wanted to ask, what is the hukum? I don't know the English word. So there are some kinds of food where there's alcohol put on, but then it's gone. So for example, they put on alcohol and then they put it on fire.
Yeah.
So then, from the chemical side of the point of view, the alcohol is gone completely.
Yeah.
So is this okay to eat or not?
So it becomes problematic from a couple of perspectives. Number one is, should a person be making or buying alcohol in the first place? They should not.
Of course not. But what I was
asking is, no, I know what you're asking. I know what you're asking. I'm going to explain the whole issue though. So the issue becomes, should a Muslim be making such a thing in the first place? They should not. Because you should not be buying alcohol nor manufacturing alcohol to use as an ingredient in the food. But now there's a food that you want to buy that has used alcohol, right? Is it allowed or not? Some scholars and madhabs consider alcohol najis. If they consider it najis, then they'll say, no, you shouldn't eat it because there's najasa been used in this food, which is disgusting and should not be used. Those who don't consider it najis may say it's okay to eat because once it's been used, like you mentioned, the effects of it are gone. because it's been cooked, for example, so you'll get some flavor, but it won't intoxicate you. Even if you ate kilos of that food, you're not going to get drunk, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, anything, if you have a lot of it and it intoxicates you, then even a little bit of it is haram. Like, I cannot drink a drop of alcohol if I know that a glass or two of that alcohol is going to make me drunk, right? But with these, for example, alcohol flavored candies or different things that are out there, even if you ate bags and bags of it, you're not going to get drunk because the effects of it intoxicating are already gone. So there is some difference of opinion among scholars. My personal practice is to avoid, to stay away from that difference of opinion and that doubtfulness. Allah knows best. Allah knows best. But there's been even talk that, like Pepsi and Coke and all these ones in the past used some, or even still do use some to an extent, but it does not intoxicate at all. Because Coca-Cola in the old days, why is it called Coca-Cola? Because they put cocaine in it. And it was used like medicine, and they would give it to babies, and because the people just didn't know much about how dangerous cocaine and other things were. Subhanallah. Okay, next section here, they talk about seafood. They said seafood encompasses all aquatic life, not just salt water, but also fresh water, right? So we're talking about fish, we're talking about also crustaceans and sea plants and all that kind of stuff. When the Prophet ﷺ was asked about these animals, the concern was what? Land animals, to eat them, what do we have to do? Slaughter them. If they've been suffocated, strangled, bludgeoned, and hit over the head, are we allowed to eat them? No, right? That's not a lawful way of killing those animals. When it comes to seafood, how do they die? You don't slaughter them, right? There's no slaughtering of a shark or a fish. You just pull it out of the water and then it dies because it suffocates basically, right? So there's a concern that this is meta. Meta means an animal that died some other way other than slaughtering, right? So is it allowed to eat this seafood? Because the companions now, once they're going to go out to sea and they're going to go on ships, so when you stay at sea for a while, this is a new world now. You need your fresh water to drink. You can't use it for wudu and bathing. You might run out of supply. And then you can't bring necessarily enough food with you. So if you want to catch seafood, what about that? So the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ this, and so he told them its water is purifying. So you want to use the salt water of the sea to make wudu for prayer or bathe for ritual Islamic bathing, that's fine. Even though it's salty, you can still use it. It's going to be purifying to you, right? And all of the food that you catch from there, even though it's going to die from this suffocation, it's still lawful for you to eat it. And it's a pure source of food. So here they say seafood comes from edible sea plants as well as aquatic animals that live only in water for most or all of their lives. The term seafood also applies to any freshwater life eaten by humans. Therefore, all edible aquatic life can be referred to as seafood. All types of sea plants as well as aquatic animals are permissible to be used for food, whether they are caught or found dead, unless they are hazardous to life or health. As the Quran states, anything you catch in the sea is lawful for you, and so is all food from it. Yeah. Anything you catch in the sea is lawful for you, and so is all food from it. What is the difference between catching and food from it? The scholars said catching is that which you catch alive. Food from it is that which you find dead. It may wash up on the shore, for example, and so on, right? So the companions once came across a beached whale, right, on the shores of the Red Sea and near what is today Jeddah and on the coast of Saudi Arabia, if I'm remembering it correctly. So when they found such an animal, they ended up eating from it. They took it back and asked the Prophet ﷺ about it and so on. And he said, give me some of it, and he ate from it to show them that it's completely lawful to benefit from that animal. And you can imagine how much meat comes from a whale and how many people that could feed and so on. The phrase, anything you catch in the above verse, refers to aquatic animals that are caught alive, while the word food refers to dead aquatic animals that are washed ashore. Okay, so seafood is lawful. There's some difference of opinion amongst some of the madhabs or scholars out there about certain types of animals that live both in the sea and in the land, right? Like certain types of maybe crabs or crustaceans or some of these kind of animals, you may find certain Muslims will tell you, oh, I can't eat shellfish, for example, and you'll be surprised, right? But in general, the majority, as far as I know, are of the opinion that you can eat everything which is living in the water. Wallahu alam. Should we keep going, or that's enough for today, I think? Let's end there. Next time we'll talk about land animals. So we'll mention the 6 categories of things which are forbidden, and then everything else is basically permissible, from those that live on land and those also that fly, birds. Okay, then after that we'll talk about Islamic slaughtering. How do you have to slaughter the animal, land animal, to be lawful to eat? And we'll talk about hunting. How is it that you could hunt an animal and it be lawful for you to eat? Okay, any questions, any comments, any corrections? The sister is here who had the question last time, or she's gone? She's gone, huh? I think they told me maybe to see her after class. Okay.
So, question.
Yes?
Is there anything about eating raw food? Is there any rule on that?
Is there any rule?
Japanese, like sashimi,
Yeah.
things like that.
No, there's no rule on eating raw food Islamically. The issue, I think, would only be about health and safety. So if there's anything that if you eat it raw, because there are certain things, if they're uncooked, maybe you could die from it, for example, right? So then it might be recommended that you avoid that. And, cooking it would be to preserve one's safety, one's health. So in general, like we mentioned earlier, don't take your own lives. Don't kill yourself, as Allah said. So anything that you know is going to have that potential effect on you. Like I know the Japanese have a dish which is some kind of a very poisonous puffer fish that if you don't handle it right and if you didn't do it right, you might die. So eating is not supposed to be that kind of a gamble. Like, I'm gonna eat this meal and it's so exciting, maybe I die, like what? Come on. So that wouldn't be okay as far as I'm concerned. Allah knows best. But eating things that are safe, like a lot of fish, if you eat it raw, you're okay. There's no real danger there. But eating raw chicken could be a real danger, like salmonella and this kind of poisonings that you might end up dying from. So a person should be cautious, I think, right? But even there are people who eat like liver raw from land animals, right? Or even some meat can be raw. Even Arabs, we have certain dishes. Syrians have kibanaya. They have this kind of like meatball dish where it's like raw meat, and they eat it. Yeah, it's enjoyable. Yeah.
So this question is not related to today's topic, but it's, I guess, recent news.
This here is what we did in the last session, though.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh no, okay, now it's switched to the other topic. Sorry. Okay, halal. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it's the idea of like, what are some guidelines, parameters that Muslims should use, especially Muslims in non-Muslim countries, in terms of political participation?
Political. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the idea, when you see like the Biden-Trump debate last night,
Yeah.
Some people might have the view that you should pick someone who's the lesser of two evils. Others might say, not even that, just don't even participate in the electoral system. I mean, this is a separate question to whether it's democracy even Islamic or not.
Yeah.
But how should Muslims look at that, especially also for new Muslims, how should they look at that as a decision for themselves?
Yeah. So in general, the Muslim has to believe that the Islamic system is the right one. And the Islamic system is comprehensive in that there's a way to govern and there's a way to do everything, right? Like we're going through these chapters now. There's rules on food and there's rules on money, there's rules on warfare, there's rules on dress, there's rules on how you govern, all of it. So the Muslim must believe that the best way is the Islamic way. And the Islamic way is not really being implemented fully today anywhere, unfortunately, right? Shura, let's say how you choose the leader, that is a bit flexible. So we can find the first 4 Khalifas, they did it in different ways, right? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ didn't elect him, but he hinted that he would be the best person. He hinted in multiple ways, right? To send the message to the people, he would be the best candidate. But right after he passed away, there was a strong debate between the companions about who should lead. In the end, he was nominated by a couple, and then the rest all agreed, and they gave him their pledge of allegiance, and then he went to the masses, and the masses gave him their pledge of allegiance, and he became the leader. When he was dying, he immediately appointed someone. He didn't want to leave it open. He said, I want Umar. He's number two, the number two companion of the Prophet ﷺ, basically, and the most qualified. Let him lead. When he was dying, people told him, appoint your son. He's a great scholar. He's very righteous. He said, no, I won't do it. He said, it's enough for my family, for one of us to face Allah with this burden, this responsibility, right? So he chose 6 people and said, this committee, one of them should be the leader. One of these 6 are the best, right? So then a couple pulled out and said, I give my vote to this one. I nominate him, and I'm rejecting. I don't want to be, right? And then it became amongst that group of 4, and in the end it was Uthman radiallahu anhu and so on, right? Then he was assassinated. So you could see that there wasn't like an exact way that the leader must be chosen. And that's why some argued this general election where you will vote for the leader, maybe that's an acceptable way and no problem. The issue is more about the democratic system believes that the people have the right to choose everything, all the laws, what's lawful and what's unlawful, what's okay and what's not okay. For example, we just talked today about alcohol and intoxicants and other things. In America, the people voted to legalize marijuana, right? And alcohol is already legalized since the prohibition. It failed, then they brought it back, so it's legal. So for them, if the majority say it's legal, then it's legal. In Islam, we say no. Once Allah has already said illegal, there's no room for us to discuss that matter anymore. Allah has said it's not allowed, right? Doesn't matter if 99.9% of the people want it, we say it's forbidden. But there are areas where Allah hasn't given us exact rules. For example, we set a speed limit, we set some traffic rules for safety and for people's life. Then scholars have said there's room for that, right? There's room for things like that. So let's say now I want to participate in a system and in elections in a country where it's a non-Muslim system that I don't really agree with. But I live there, and therefore I want to have some influence over it. So the opinion that I'm the most comfortable with, that I've seen from some of my teachers, would be that you participate up to the extent that would be halal. So for example, they have a law that they want to discuss about maybe gay marriage or abortion or something like this, and you have an Islamic position on that matter. Then it would be okay for you to go and vote maybe against that law that you don't agree with, right? Or to vote for the one that you do agree with, right? As long as it's matching with Islam. Now comes the issue of voting for candidates. Some have said if you're voting for a candidate and you believe strongly that he is going to benefit Islam and Muslims, then you could select him. And others said no, you just shouldn't even participate in that system at all. The problem I see when it comes to the president, I personally have never participated as an American citizen in any American election, right? When I was young and growing up in America, especially pre-9/11, then what happened was the Muslim community, we are conservative by our nature, supposed to be, maybe not so conservative anymore, unfortunately, in America, but used to be. So they said, we align more with which side? Republicans. Because the Republicans are the conservatives. So the Republicans are against gay marriage, against abortion. They believe in more family values and marriage and blah, blah, blah. So, okay, we agree with them as practicing Christians on these matters. So we should choose them. So there were Islamic groups within the mosques that were campaigning and pushing for everyone vote for Bush. So we all selected Bush, right? I didn't participate, but they all selected Bush. So those people who voted for Bush, then what did he go on and do? How many thousands and millions of Muslims did he kill? In Afghanistan, in Iraq, right? So now how do you face Allah on the Day of Judgment and you say, yeah, I helped elect this guy because the Muslim vote actually helped him get into power. So we helped choose him, and then here's what he did against Islam and Muslims. And then the Muslims switched to the other side. They said, okay, the Republicans have really become anti-immigrant, and all the Muslims are mainly immigrants, and they hate brown people, and they're racist, and they have this and that. So we better jump to the other side because we're more with that side because they're more compassionate and merciful and equality and all that. But they're the ones who are also dancing in the gay pride parade, and they're doing this and that. So you don't agree with them on everything. What do you do? And now if you elected, for example, Obama dropped 65,000 missiles mainly on Muslims just in the last year of his 8 years of presidency. He dropped more missiles than Bush ever did. So even though the Democratic side seemed to be more friendly and nice on their surface, the statistics show a different story, a very scary story, right? They assassinated Americans overseas, citizens, without any court, without any trial, without any, what is this, right? So to be the one who voted again for that person, I don't know. How are you going to face Allah on the Day of Judgment and say, yeah, I chose him because I hoped he was going to kill less millions of Muslims and innocent people? I don't know. It's awful. So I think a Muslim needs to be very, very cautious and prepare your answer. If you are going to participate, you felt very confident that this was going to be for the good and benefit of mankind. But if you're just propping up these like mouthpieces for Zionism and all this evil, we can see what they are doing in the world today, then it probably would be better to just avoid participating in that system. That's my personal opinion, for you as an individual to be on the safe side. Now, many will argue if the Muslims completely step out of the process, then we have no say in the matter. Well, does your say actually matter? Or is it just two sides of the same coin? Whether you choose heads or tails, it's still the same thing. It doesn't really matter. So Republican or Democrat, it's all part of one like machine, and they all have one agenda, especially on certain matters like Israel and other things. We can just see in the American system, at least, doesn't really matter who you go for. They're all the same. So Allah knows best. Yani. May Allah protect us all and guide us to what's best and improve the situation of humanity. Any other questions or comments? Anything online, brother? Nothing? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Back to the seafood.
Yeah?
I know that there's, just looking at the next section,
Yeah.
predatory animals for land animals.
What is it? About what?
The next section on land animals.
Yeah.
Predatory.
Predatory, yeah.
What
Yeah.
about predatory fish?
So yeah, predatory seafood would be okay. So sharks, for example, or anything like that, you can eat. Because almost all seafood is going to eat other forms of seafood. Maybe the very bottom feeders are going to eat plankton or some seafood, but most of the other fish are eating other fish. So all seafood is lawful. It's quite different. It must be something about their digestive system and the effects of that meat on the body, for example, I would assume, because in general, anything that Allah has made lawful, then there is some health aspect to it, and the thing which He has forbidden, you can find that there's some maybe harm and benefit in avoiding. So in Islam, the predatory land animals are forbidden, and the predatory birds are forbidden as well. So anything the Prophet ﷺ said with talons, like a falcon, an eagle, a hawk, these kind of birds are forbidden to eat. And in land and bird animals, if you do also hunt those animals too much and eat them, what does it do? It destroys the whole ecosystem as well. Where with seafood, of course, the way we fish nowadays is also messed up. Where we fish by the tons. You know, these trawlers, they go and catch with the net like, I don't know how many tons of fish in one shot, like the Japanese and others do that. But if we fished in a more sustainable way, then seafood reproduces fast and in huge numbers. How many eggs a fish can lay, right? So many. But with land animals, it's not the case. So if you were to hunt tigers and lions and all these animals, you destroy the ecosystem, because those predators are needed to keep the other populations in check. Otherwise, they also become too much, then they eat up all the plants and the whole system gets messed up, and then the animals may end up dying or suffering as a result of that. So there's multiple wisdoms, I think, behind why this exists. But in general, we believe it and accept it, which is don't eat any animals with fangs. Dogs, cats, lions, tigers, all these kind of predatory animals. The Prophet ﷺ described them by their teeth. They have canine teeth, right? Those sharp teeth. We have them as well. But we're omnivores, obviously. We eat meat and plants. But carnivorous animals will usually have those teeth, where herbivores, those that eat plants, they have flat teeth. Because all they do is chomp on veggies, like cows and all these animals. They don't have sharp teeth. They don't need it. And similarly with birds, like chickens and other animals, they have claws, but they don't have those big talons, those hooks like hawks do that they catch other birds and catch fish with and stuff like that. So those kind of birds are forbidden to eat, if that makes sense. We'll talk about the details of it next week as well, inshallah, in more detail. Any other questions, comments, corrections? Did I see a hand? Okay, we'll end there, inshallah. And it's dhuhr time, so maybe we're going to pray dhuhr down at the hall for anyone that wants to join us, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.